In this lesson, we'll take a look at creating the back scales. So the first thing that I'll do is to go ahead and create a new layer. So go over here into our Layers tab, choose New Layer, and I'm going to drag this down underneath the ambient occlusion, right in the middle there. And let's call this something like Back. Okay, now let's go into our Texture tab. Let's go ahead and open a new texture, and we'll open the Stone 161 from our project files. Let's go ahead and select a portion of this image, or you can select the whole thing if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and select part of that. Control C to copy. Go back to our view, and I'm going to turn around to the back side. Okay, and let's go ahead and come in a little bit closer. Go to Projection Painting, and I want to Control V to paste, and then I want to transform the bitmap. So I'll click on that option, and I'll scale it down a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and have it cover the upper portion of this. Okay. Now at this point, we're using a projection layer, so we can go in with our eraser. Say yes, we want to transform the layer. And with our eraser, we can come in and erase portions of this. So let's say, we don't want it up here on the neck. Okay, so we can erase some of this at this point. Let's come down here and we can erase it down here. But we can also go ahead and apply it. So you can project that down onto our texture. Okay, so we want to have our texture selected. You can see it here. And it's actually going to be on a particular layer. So let me turn off projection painting. So it's going to be on our back layer. So we can still, at this point, come in with our eraser and erase out the detail from that layer. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and just define where we want this detail to be. We want it to be just on these scales. So you can see the gap there from where it projected over the edges of the scales. So I'm just going to come in and kind of erase some of the detail that I don't want. We'll do the same thing down here. So we'll do the same type of projection. We'll just do it on that bottom part. Okay, so we'll get rid of some of that extra detail. We're just trying to leave the detail in the right places. Okay, so in the soft tissue in here, we don't really want it. We want it more on the hard surfaces. So we can come in here and erase this out. Same thing over here. Come in and erase some of that projected detail out of the texture. Do the same thing over here on this side. Just go ahead and paint that out. And up here on the top as well. And then inside, in between here, I want to go ahead and remove that as well. Okay, same thing down here in these areas inside here. You can go ahead and get rid of that. Same thing over here. Let's go ahead and get rid of a little bit of that until we just have the texture on top of these scales. Okay. Now we can do this again down here. So we could take our texture once again, go ahead and let's transform it again. This time we'll use it to define these bits here. Maybe we want to rotate it so it doesn't look exactly the same. So we can kind of rotate it up to the side there. Maybe scale it a little bit. Scale it down a little bit more. We can use our eraser to erase the overlap up here. So it's because we're working on the same layer. Okay, so we can erase some of that overlap from the ones up above. Okay, we can go ahead and apply that projection. Okay, let's turn off that, and then we can go back in again, same thing, And let's dial our size up a little bit. We can come back in and erase out the areas that we don't want. Again, because there's a seam going down the center of the back, this is going to be an easier task here in our 3D view. But if you didn't have a seam, you could project that down. You could do it just as well in your texture view. So I'll go ahead and continue to just paint that out. And just erasing all those elements. So only on this layer, all we have is this sort of stone texture on top of those little scales. And you can see we missed one right there. We can fix that in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and erase just the areas that are inside of there. Okay. Now if you want to tweak this texture or get rid of elements like this little yellow dot here, you can use the stamp. So I could come in here and sample an area from here and use it to paint in an area right in there. Okay, let me actually set this scale. I want to set this scale to 100. Okay. And let me sample that in there. Okay. You can change your brush size as well. And we can come down here and do the same thing. So I could sample this area, control click, and then I could just paint it in. So sample and paint. Could paint that across here. Okay, so right now this color doesn't really match too much. So what we can do once we have this defined, and you can see I can turn this off and on, we could play with the blend modes. So I could hit multiply, and that does a lot. You could try different kinds of blend modes to just see what kind of a effect you can get. You can also use filters to change this. So I could select this layer, go to filter, and go to color correction, hue, saturation, and go ahead and find our detail here. There we go. So there's some of the detail that you can see, and this is the flat version of it. But we can actually change the hue. So you can see I'm changing the hue of that. So we can modify that a little bit. You could make it more saturated, maybe make it less saturated, lighter, darker. Okay, maybe something like that, or you could tweak it a little bit. Say okay to that. You could blend it in using visibility. So you have a lot of different options, and separating it as a layer helps you to be able to just isolate it and be able to tweak it on its own if you want to change something about that or make a different layer that has a completely different look for those scales. You can do that. Okay, and if you go into texture, you can see that layer here. Okay, so we turn off our UV mesh. You can see how the texture map is looking all combined together to get this sort of a look. So now that we've got the back scales, let's go ahead and start to tweak the neck texture. So we'll go ahead and do that next.